Should I acknowledge Dr. Gillette?
I will acknowledge him.
Like a shout out to him?
I will acknowledge him in my talk.
Oh, okay, good, great.
Right. So we are live right now.
Okay.
Hi, good morning. We'd like to welcome everyone to our virtual lecture today. We've been highly anticipating this lecture from RC with Dr. Sameh Iskander, who is a senior research associate at the Institute for the Study of the Ancient World, also affiliated with New York University. And his lecture today is on the highly awaited update on the recent discoveries at the Temple of Ramesses II in Abydos. So with that, I'd like to welcome everybody and welcome Dr. Sameh.
Thank you, Christina, for the introduction. And thank you all for tuning in. My talk, as the title shows here, recent work at the Temple of Ramesses II in Abydos. It's a New York University ISO project. Just a brief introduction for those who are not familiar with Abydos. It's located 500 kilometers south of Cairo. It is the religious domain of the god Osiris, god of the afterlife, one of the most popular gods in ancient Egypt. And here is the aerial map photo of the site, which goes back to the 4th millennium BC, and full of monuments. And here is some of the monuments, and this is the location of the Temple of Ramesses II, right there in white. The temple was first noted on the map of the Napoleon French expedition of Abydos, as it's published in the Description de l'Égypte in 1808, and you see it here. And at the time, only few granite blocks were above surface. So the entire temple was completely covered. 50 years later, Mariette came and excavated the site from 1861 to 1869. And then after that, only just really nobody worked on the excavation. The German Institute had 2 study seasons in 1979 and 1981. And the SCA had 1 exploration season in 1994. And then we started the work in 2008 till this year. The goals of our mission that started by Dr. Agden Goulet and myself back in 2008 was to produce complete epigraphic documentation of the temple, which we published in 2015-16. And with another goal is complete architectural analysis, which we published it in a couple of years later. An updated translation of the temple inscriptions with comprehensive analysis, which we also published a couple of years ago. And then we proceeded to the excavation, conservation of the temple precinct. That was our next goal, and the site management. The temple was the first monument or temple built by Ramesses II in Egypt proper upon his accession in 1279 BC. And it lies 300 meters north of his father's temple, the big temple of Seti I. And here is a survey of the 2 temples. And you may be able to see that the 2 temples are not really exactly parallel, but the Temple of Ramesses seems to be tilted a little bit to the north, with an orientation to the north. So there is a 7 degrees between the 2 axes. The Temple of Ramesses was oriented toward an area south of al-Ka'ab, whereas the Temple of Ramesses, I'm sorry, the Temple of Seti, I said, to the south of the al-Ka'ab, whereas the Temple of Ramesses II, now we see that was oriented to a hill called the Hirakushi Hikarushi Hill. It's a New Kingdom bark shrine where Osiris barks may have been placed before entering al-Qab, as you see it to the southwest. Here is another view, and it shows the procession coming from the top here, from the temple of Osiris, goes down the valley, stops at the Hirakoshi hill, and they go to al-Qab, and this is the temple of Ramses for some reason is oriented to this hill. On the left, we see a Google Earth map in 2008 showing the temple standing by itself. There's just nothing around it. And on the right, it's a Google Earth map in 2024, which shows the entire precinct that we have completed clearing it. So the site is 2.5 acres of the precinct. We also discovered a massive Old Kingdom wall. It's really very late Old Kingdom wall and first intermediate period. I'm going to call it from now on Old Kingdom. And then we had also another excavation to the west of the temple. Here is the sort of a 3D, 2D illustration of the temple, just to be easy to go over this. This will be my basis for the discussion going on. And here is to the west. We did excavation to the west and then to the north here. So I will organize my talk is that I will, excuse me. Okay, I'll organize my talk. I first talk about the architecture of the temple. Then I'm going to talk about the finds, and then about the excavation to the west, and then the Old Kingdom wall to the northeast. Our first goal in the excavation was to identify the enclosure wall. And we finally identified it, and they start to work inside. So the enclosure wall is a mud brick, 3.5 meter thick. So we estimate the height would have been maybe 6 to 8 meters high, because the height is usually 2 to 3 times the width. And so it's almost the same height of the temple. So the temple really was not really visible from outside. And that enclosure wall must have looked like a fortress from the outside. And we didn't know the details of the top of the enclosure wall, because whatever was remaining varied from sort of a half meter to a meter, whatever was left, to really sometimes 2 meters. So the stone temple inside here is usually the focal point of interest to scholars and visitors, as the surrounded brick wall was not of an interest. The surrounding big structures and wall were not of an interest, because it's mud brick. It's mostly broken. It's not very interesting. So my talk today is about this. This part is the surrounding structures around the temple, the mud brick structures. The stone temple, we already have done that, and is not part of my presentation. This is a survey of the temple. It's 100 meters, the entire precinct, 100 meters by 91 meters. And the temple is not symmetrically laid within the enclosure wall. And just to give a background of how this temple compared with other Ramesside temples in Thebes and Abydos. So if our area is 2.5 acres, Medinat Habu is 16 acres, city the first 14 acres, the Ramesses is 12 acres, and Merneptah had 3 acres. So the temple of Ramses is definitely the smallest temple of this entire group. Can you move, Christina, can you move this? Yeah, I want this, I can move it myself, okay. So we start looking at the architecture of this precinct. The walkways around the temple itself, the stone temple, are 3.5 meters wide. There are 42 vaulted roofed magazines, mostly in groups of 7, and the 3 side doors to the temple, as you see in red. Okay, and here are the 3 walkways around the temple. And there are 3 doors, as I mentioned, 2 on the south and 2 on the north, and they're marked here by the red arrows. These walls had elaborate, dazzling inscriptions like any ancient Egyptian temple, but they could not be viewed from outside the precinct because the walls were as high as the temple, and they only could be viewed from this relatively narrow walkways. And for example, we have the Kaddish inscriptions on the west and north of the temple. And you can see all these intricate details that will go up 7 or 8 meters. And even you have here the poem, which will go also the same distance. So it's rather very difficult to really be able to see this. If you look at the sketch that I have on the right, how can one see all these inscriptions all the way up? So who was the intended audience for this? Obviously, the walkways were very much restricted access. Even for people who are there, it's very difficult to really read or view all these inscriptions. So the audience, in my opinion, was the deities, the gods, these inscriptions were for the protection of the temple, but was not really for propaganda, as is always or sometimes posited. Now we look at sort of some of the details of the temple. As you see down below, let me try to move this here. No, this area in blue had a sandstone floor. So this obviously was the entrance to the temple where the heavy provisions were brought in. And we assume this is a door here because the entire area here was completely lost. But because of this walkway here, that must have been the side entrance for the provisions and for the public during the festivals to be admitted here, because I don't think they were brought in through the main gate in the first pylon. So the public will walk in here, whereas on the right side, this area of administration, and this area here is probably security and for the residents of the staff. And then we're going to go here for like a brief walk. We see the entrance where the public was admitted during the festivals, as I said, and we'll pass by a large kiln, temple palace, 7 storage magazine, and stairs. Why is not this move? Why is not moving? Okay. Here is the first door where the public would be admitted, and you can see that from the finger gouges there was a heavy presence of the public. And as we walk inside in the first court, we see the finger gouges. only in the first court. On the left, we see here the large kiln that I mentioned. I'm going to show it now, and then Temple Palace and civil magazines and stairs. Here is the large kiln, very well built, and it's interesting. It's located in a very prominent place of the temple, right next to the Temple Palace. And we have some of the, it's mostly faience, whatever there, and then plates for small amulets that we found, faience amulets. So it's interesting that the manufacturing of the faience amulets would be would be done in a prominent place in the temple. And here is a 3D of this kiln. And here is the Temple Palace with an entrance to the court, second court. And it's built of, sorry. To going backwards. Sorry for that. Okay. It's a plan of the, sorry for this. It's a plan of the Temple Palace. And it differs than the Temple Palaces in the other Ramesside temples in Thebes, because this is built of stone. So it may have been, maybe it's administrative office, but it fits also the location of the temple palaces, so it's somewhere in between. But anyway, we found a burial here, and we have several burials that I will mention, of a bull or a cow, very well, carefully buried. So it's probably related to a local cult such as Abochus of Armant, or generally Serapis. It's dated to the Ptolemaic period according to the ceramics. And then we have the 7 magazines and stairs to the right. And we rebuilt some of these vaulted magazines. And I'm going to get to this a little later. And here is, we have a scene published from the tomb TT 157, showing how the grain is brought up to the top of the vaulted magazines from the stairs that we see on the right, and is sort of dumped from the top and taken out from the side doors. And here are the 7 magazines. And we found, and whatever the red arrows show, there was holes punctured into the walls, and we found inside skulls of cattle. So we found about 14 of them, which very unusual way to bury the cattle inside the mud brick walls, and then pack them in, and then close the holes. We also excavated around the corners of the temple, looking for foundation deposits. And in this corner, we did find underground the cartouches of the Ramesses II. And underneath, we found here is the cartouches in very beautiful yellow, golden yellow paint. And underneath, we found a large foundation deposits with different objects, as you see. In the western area, it's this very narrow walkway between the western wall and the enclosure wall. And here is, just to give you an idea, the enclosure wall, which is about 3.5 meters wide. And here is a cross section. So we built this wall to a height of about 3 meters for protection and for protection from entry and also from the wind-blown sand. In the north area of the precinct, somehow it looks, the way we found it's very different from the south. There are 232 magazines, mostly in groups of 7, again, separated by corridors, except that the top right here, there's a group of 4 magazines. And the magazines in the middle are completely destroyed. Well, before I get that, this is the corridor and the 7 magazines on each side of the corridor. And at the end of the corridor here, you see a chapel with a limestone base. And there would have been here on top of it an arch. So some of the magazines did not have stairs. So again, like another scene in TT60, how the other storage items were brought in, such as wine jars and ritual equipment. So this area in red was completely destroyed. And this is how we found it. And there was a well, 8 meters deep well, that was dug in there. Here is the well. And you look back, you see the entire part is completely wiped out, destroyed. Here is the well. We went down 8 meters till we reached the underground water. So what happened during the late Roman period, all the mud brick was crushed and leveled, and this was used as a field. And we have about 50 to 70 centimeters deep of clay that came from the crushed stone, crushed red mud brick. So we removed this layer and we mixed it again, and we created our own bricks. So this is the resurrection of bricks. So it was mud, became Ramesside bricks, late Roman, crushed in late Roman, then we took it and then we made bricks again. The magazine storage capacity in this temple is about 3,700 cubic meters. To compare it with the ones in the city first temple, it's a little bit over 11. So in total, we have 15,000 cubic meter of storage that was built almost at the same time. And this is a equivalent of 20,000 sacks or jars. That's a lot of storage. And mostly, I would say this storage was for grain. Again, a lot of sacks. And so this new storage must have altered Abydos' economic landscape. This will be a basis for a study of the economy of Abydos there. Just for comparison, the Ramesside storage capacity is 16,500 cubic meters. So within the first couple of decades, Ramses had something like over 30,000 cubic meter. Probably he needed this for his building activities and wars. in the north and the south and the west. Then to continue our tour, we go to the east side of the temple, this area here. This is a view, and you can see this area I'm talking about. On the right-hand side, there were very late, I guess, very Byzantine period, because it's mostly a Christian Coptic, late Coptic, maybe 7th century here, structures. And on the right, there was very little. So we decided to restore the one to the right and clear the one to the left, so that this is the one to the right. It was mostly area of probably workshops, because we found a lot of kilns and storage objects. And the one to the right was the floor of the original floor of the Ramesside period, which, interestingly enough, was mud brick. So as the visitor will enter to the right, this is part of the history of the temple, where the late Roman, Byzantine period, the Copts moved in and built their own structures there. And to the right is the original floor. So we still need to build the pylon, the two sections of the pylon, because nothing had survived except the foundation. And strictly, we see here on the inscription in the south wall of the temple, the two two great pylons. So we did build this pylon of mud brick, because the foundation was mud brick. And we built a walkway of limestone, because also we have that the foundation was found to be a limestone walkway. And here is our pylon. We went about 2 meters high. And here is the entrance to the pylon after our restoration. And then I'm going to now switch to the finds in the temple. We have this third dynasty granodiorite head, extremely not only rare, it's unprecedented in Abydos. No remains of the third dynasty were ever found in Abydos, because the third dynasty moved to Saqqara. This head is not inscribed, but it's clearly had the stylistic features of the third dynasty. We compare that with a corpus of 23rd dynasty published 23rd dynasty statues. You see the serrated wig and covering the ears and ending a kind of flat cuts and receding forehead. And I'm just having here an example of 3 others. We found also a fragment that obviously it is Amarna style. We compare it with the Amarna princesses, with the wide buttocks and thighs. And this is the back. The back was flat, and we have this flint part of it, which we don't understand what's its purpose, or it was part of the stone. In Abydos, there were total of 28 Amarna talatat that were found, 26 of them by David O'Connor and 2 others. But those were building blocks, probably brought for Amarna. But this statuette here is likely a ritual item. It's not a building material like the other 28 blocks that I mentioned. So it's perhaps came from Amarna, a chapel in Amarna, or it's a chapel in Abydos. Also, they have the green gray wax statue of Psamtik, the chamberlain of the divine adoratus of the 26th dynasty. And we found also a lintel of Psamtik II, So probably there was a chapel or a small structure for something the second, or it came from somewhere else in Abydos. We also have this beautiful head, granodiorite of a queen wearing vulture headdress. It's obviously early Thutmose III style, probably his mother or Isis or one of his wives. Also, this was found by the SCA near the surface of the temple near the entrance of Ramses II himself, and preserved, very well preserved. You see the nose completely intact, the vermilion lines with just a little bit of a damage at the bottom part of the, and then you have the philtrum. So, and then you have to see the color, the red color of the lips, and the yellowish part of the remaining of the face. Also, we found it was found by the SCA, the nemes and the legs. The legs is almost 2 meters high. So the nemes fit the head, and there we found few other small little fragments of the statue. So we put it together on paper, of course, and it came using the proportions of the New Kingdom seated royal statue. So the statue came to be about 6 meters high. Unfortunately, we could not find any more fragments. So my dream was to find at least 60, 70% of the statue to be able to put it together, maybe 80%. We didn't find anything. So we cannot restore this statue. Here is what I thought. We'll put it here on the south side of the second pylon. But because of the symmetry of Egyptian architecture, we thought we'll find another one here. So we excavated here, and sure enough, we found a limestone base, very similar to the one that was I just mentioned. But we looked all over the area here. We did not find the northern statue. What we found, a huge amount of gray granite, small little fragments that filled so many bags. So that was the fate of this statue to the right. We found also 13 stelae. Only one of them is from the Ramesses II. All the others, Ptolemaic and Roman and late Roman. And now I want to go to a deposit that you see here in red, right here. And when all were deposited in this magazine at the same time, one large deposit. And that's how it looked, with completely different objects there. So the way the deposit was found clearly indicate that it was brought definitely at the same time. There's no stratigraphy here. There's no layers. And we have different objects. One of the objects we found was a roll of papyrus that we managed to, Muhammad Ibrahim, our restorer at the time, managed to completely unroll it. And basically, there were two different papyri. In Demotic, this was translated by Dr. Richard Jasno. It shows different, it was inscribed by different scribes during the reigns of Ptolemy VI and Ptolemy VIII. And the papyrus contained a record of shipments maintained for a period of many, many years between the two dates I mentioned. And it contains locations mentioned of shipment that either shipped or received, mostly wine. So we have 19 breweries, but also include other material. And here is the list of all the destinations. And as you see in red, these are all wineries. So it's interesting that Abydos was very active. There was from a commercial point of view, there were a lot of export and import of objects, not only wine, but we have honey, wood, things which, whatever they are, which were on the sacred bark, bread, beans, heather, sheep. The other papyrus was also translated by Dr. Jasno and collaboration with Dr. Mark Smith. It talks about 5 festival songs sung in the Theban annual Opet festival during the inundation months. And these songs address the Amun-Ra and Moon. So why a ritual text dealing with a distinctively Theban religious celebration like Opet festival should have been found here in Abydos? How, when, and by whom would it have been utilized here in Abydos? Well, there are 2 areas. It's probably composed for a local version of the Opet festival here in Abydos, or it brought to Abydos, perhaps by someone who has traveled to Abydos to take part in the festivities, or festivals of those Theban deities that mentioned in the city temple anyway, which is related to the other suggestion anyway. We also found over 2,000 skulls of rams. This was analyzed by Dr. Sameh Iskander and Louise Bertini. They were particularly interesting because most of the horns were still intact. Some of the heads were wrapped by linen, and some of them were, most of them were not. Again, when were these rams' remains deposited in the temple precinct? Again, from where, why, whose cult? Was it cult of Khanum, Ba of Osiris, Amun, Amun-Ra, etc.? But we have some just selected ram skulls here. I have them in red. We have, of course, Amun, Amun-Ra. We have Ba of Osiris, as Shabs Hotep near Asyut, Khanum in Elephantini, Khanum in Isna, Ba of Gebeb in Herwer, and Ba of Osiris in Mendes. Some of the horns were wrapped, so probably they were offerings, or maybe they were separated from the skull. We found 2 complete dog mummies, all in this deposit. 146 dogs, 23 goats, and many other items. We have 1 pig, 1 donkey, even we have 1 crocodile. Very, very mixed deposit of various animals. So what do you do with thousands of skulls? You either bury them or put them in magazines that are already overcrowded. So we rebuilt, as I mentioned before, some of this vaulted roofs of the magazines, and we put these skulls in exactly where we found them. So this is the this is the magazine I showed before in red, and this is after we built it and put the skulls here, and it will be open for visitors to view. And this is here we have showing the structure of those vaulted roofs. There are 3 layers, and we left the 3 layers to show the construction of those vaults. Also, there were human remains that are also studied and cataloged. And still in the same deposit, we find a large quantity of generally very well preserved leather remains, total of 446 pieces of leather, whole catalog. Their quantity and good condition, together with their Ptolemaic remain dates, roughly, makes it one of the most important, remarkable leather finds in Egypt to date. So we have leather, very fancy leather shoes. Some of the shoes are whatever tailed toggle shoes. Some of them are repaired. Others were new, like this. This is new. This is repaired. We also, the assemblage came from, we have also bags here, and the entire leather assemblage came from some sort of workshop, a place where leather objects, specifically shoes, were made and repaired in Abydos. So more work needed to be to determine the origins of the entire deposits. This came from different areas within Abydos. And when was it moved to the temple and why? Probably it was moved from several areas to clear the space for something else, but they're coming from different places, completely unrelated. So we'll work on that. Basically, we have, as I mentioned before, three main burials: the ram skulls to the left, top left, northwest, and the animal bones in the magazines, 7 magazines, and the animal skeleton under the floor of the temple palace. But this attests to the flourishing animal cults in Egypt and the desire for respectability. Talking about animal burials, here we found this sarcophagus of some, we did not open the mummy, it's a mummy here, and buried with a mummy of 2 dogs, one dog here and one dog to the right, and underneath a donkey, part of a donkey skull here. Jaw, a donkey jaw right here. We found huge amount of fragments, temple fragments. Probably they were, some of them came from inside the temple when Mariette excavated the temple and he dumped his remains, rubbish, whatever, to the outside the temple, and that's what we encountered. And, you know, we don't know how, why, and whom, and when this temple was dismantled, but we can see here the remains of the tools of cutting the fragments. And as I said, when did this happen and where, and for what reason? So we know one of them was for building material. What we have left in the temple is only 20% of the entire temple. So the 80% of the temple is gone, and probably for building material or for another reason. And this little structure here might give us a clue. It's a structure that we dated to maybe probably a couple of 100 years old. And you put the fuel in here, and you put the limestone here from the temple fragments, and then you get the lime. So probably this was a way to produce lime during the past couple of 100 years. And this is a plan of this kiln, if we want to call it, about 70, 80 meters from the temple. We also found lots of Coptic fragments. So most likely there is a nearby church, which this is something we will look for this coming season. And we have lots of ostraca, but I find this one is kind of very interesting. It's written in top in Arabic, early version of Arabic without dots or sharta or hamza, and below is in Coptic. So here is somebody who was translating from Coptic to very, very early Arabic, which is dated to the 8th century, before Osman ibn Affan added the dots to the Arabic script. Also, we were curious to see if there is a structure west of the temple, similar to the Osirian, west of the temple of Seti I, right here, which is, it seems to be what's happening with many of the monuments in Abydos. You have the Temple of Osiris has association with al-Qayab. The Temple of Seti has association with the Osirian. Same thing with Temple of Senusert III, his tomb. Ahmoza with also the tomb to the west. They're all associated with Western structures. So the Temple of Ramses had the same thing, and that's why we started the excavation here. We did some excavation several years ago, but we went only 25 meters. This time went 120 or 150 meters to the west. And we really did not find anything. What we found, about 50 centimeters below the surface, there is hard tafla, barrel with sort of poor burials all around. Just this hard merle. All these sarcophagi was dug in, or burials were dug into this layer. And to our surprise, we found a 16 tombs, mud brick tombs, which we did not expect at all. And this came at the very end of our season. So this is probably, the last, we worked the last day of our excavation trying to clear this one. So we have to go back. And this is the one to the right here. This is the 16 tombs that we found. And we did to the Thutmose III. And here are the 16 tombs. And you can see it right here in a very intricate architectural layout. And they all have barrel vaults, similar to the one in the temple. So this is really work in progress, and we need to go back and continue work in this area. And it all seems to be oriented toward the two chapel of Thutmose III at the entrance of the Osiris temple. My final part here is our final presentation here is the northeast of the corner of the temple. While we're excavating for the foundation of the pylon of the Temple of Ramses, we came across a perpendicular Old Kingdom First Intermediate Period wall that was cut to accommodate for the new pylon of Ramses, built in 1279, and this is dated 1,000 years earlier. So what we have here, this is the pre-Ramesside Old Kingdom, was continuing to the right, but was carved, and then Ramses built his pylon here. And the turned out to be a massive structure that comes from the east, west, and turns north, and with a buttress that goes, as you see here, sort of a quarter circle. And the wall extended to the north at least 164 meters. So this is a huge structure. And it's obviously, it is some sort of an enclosure wall that comes from the east, turns and goes up to the north. And here is a view looking west, and here is the buttress, and below the pylon, and a plan of what we found that season. And the red is the pylon. So the wall obviously extend to the east, and I said 164 meters to the north. This is sort of our site management. You see the pylon to the right here, and here is the Old Kingdom enclosure wall, so that for the viewer you come and see what happened. That when Ramses came to build his temple, he built it intentionally on top of this wall. So this wall must have been, if it's this wall is 5 meters wide. I didn't mention that. So it must have been at least 10 meters high. That is very, very huge structure, maybe 15 meters high. For those of you who have been to the Shuna, it's as high as the Shuna. Huge structure. We kept excavating north, exploring north really. We found a doorway at the very end with a very well preserved limestone gateway. So this is a completely different landscape that we have now. This wall is an enclosure wall. This is the entrance. This is before I get into that, this is the gateway, and the wall extends. This is our temple here, and it goes this way, and here to the west, to the north, and to the south, the temple, and here is the gateway. And on the gateway, there is some graffiti, maybe related to any. So if you look at the aerial map, here is our wall here in red, and here is the gateway, and here is our temple below. So obviously it's an enclosure wall, but the question is, what does this enclosure wall enclose? For this, we went back to investigate the other large provincial enclosure walls dated to late Old Kingdom First Intermediate period, in order to provide some kind of a comparison or synthesis of building activities during this period of late Old Kingdom. So we went to Bubastis, Edfu, Komombo, Elephantini, and Ain Asil. I didn't go to Ain Asil, but I have the records here. They all have similar walls, more or less, built around the same time. So in Bubastis, there's a 4-meter enclosure wall with a gateway very similar to ours, almost the same dimensions. And inside there's a chapel, a temple, and a settlement. In Edfu, the enclosure wall was built during the First Intermediate period, our period, and has similar architectural features like the round corner and the buttress. And inside there was administrative quarters, storage facilities, and residential area of the local elite. Similar features in Komombo, with the remains of a settlement. Elephantini, the same thing, but the one in Elephantini was really built during the First and Second Dynasty, but was enlarged during the First Intermediate period in Old Kingdom. Inside there is a settlement and the governor's residence and cow chapels. And Ain Asil, similar thing with one gateway, very similar to ours, and inside the same structures. So to look at the gateways, they're very similar. They were built at around the same time, almost the same dimensions. And within them, there were governor's residence, guard chapels, administrative building, elite houses, and one gateway. I'm arguing that inside here, we have similar settlement area for governors, for whatever we, so it will be, before I get into that, we have here the gateway that we discovered. So if it's central gateway, like many of the other structures I just mentioned, so this will be more or less our area of the settlement here, or it could actually extend, this wall could extend this way. The reason we stop somewhere here, this area here is all built already, so we cannot touch this. So the only way is to go and excavate here. And if this is our plan this coming season, we have our permit. We're gonna start to see what is inside here, and I'm convinced that right here we have a settlement with all the other buildings and settlement that I mentioned, governor's residence, elite residence, and guard chapels. So keep tuned, and I will let you know sometime soon after this. With deep appreciation to the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities and New York University ISAO, and the generosity of the RC and the Friends of the Temple of Ramesses II Abydos. And also thanks to the epigraphic documentation team that took 8 years to finish the epigraphic survey, and to members of the excavation and conservation team, and to all the rest of the hardworking crew. And thank you. Christina?
Hi. Yes.
Hi,
we
I'm
have-
finished.
Thank you, Dr. Sama. That was wonderful. That's amazing discoveries at the end of the season. It's going to be exciting your next season. We have several questions. The first one is, what do you think of the Ramesses Temple? Why do you think the Ramesses Temple is the smallest in the group?
I think this was the temple that Ramses built immediately upon his accession in 1279. So this is his first monument. And I guess as a first monument, he started small, and from there on, he went big. That's my interpretation.
Okay, thank you for that. Were all the ram's heads and horns found?
I'm sorry, where or is it where?
Where were all the ram's heads and horns found?
They found in the magazine, it's all in one magazine, the northwest corner of the temple. They were all dumped into this magazine at the same time, but we don't know from where they came.
Were the magazines not used for food exclusively?
No, yes, the magazines were used for storage
For storage, okay.
during the Ramesside period and at some point afterwards. But these were deposited, we probably very late Ptolemaic or Roman at some point, so that the temple was not really functioning anymore. But they were brought there for some reason to the temple. They were not discarded as refuse, as garbage, but there was some kind of a respect to bring them to the temple, to a temple.
To a temple, okay. Okay, next question. Given that the Battle of Kadash is inscribed, Are we to assume the battle was before your 1279 BCE date or early in Ramses' reign?
No, we know that the battle was in the year 5 of Ramses II, but it's carved on the walls of the temple, obviously, much at some point after the year 5.
Okay. Were there any markings or writing on the animal wrappings?
No,
No.
unfortunately not.
And what was the lime used for?
The lime was used for building material for the mortar at the time, before the invention of cement.
The invention of cement, okay.
Before the invention of cement.
As the binder, the
Yes.
building binder.
Yes.
Okay. Are there remains of the nearby temple of Osiris? Or are the remains near the temple of Osiris?
We don't get those. No, we don't.
What did the OK wall enclose?
That's what I'm trying to find out next season.
Okay.
Well, we're gonna. I mean, I think the Old Kingdom encloses a settlement of that, as I mentioned, that has the governor's office, residence, elite residence, chapels, maybe small temple that are located within this, but we really don't know yet. And this is what we'll start to work on in January.
In January, okay. With the vast amount of bones found in one location, was there evidence of warfare or disease that contributed to it? Or do you think most of them were related to ceremonial or festival sacrifices in that case?
Well, I mean, to answer the first part of the question, there was warfare because one of the objects we found, arrows, bronze arrows. So there must have been some kind of military confrontation. I think the animals were mostly rituals. They were not. They were offerings used for rituals. But the sheer number of the animals is kind of perplexing. Where did they come from? We talk about over 2,000 rams.
Really?
Yes.
Quite a bit. Are some of the inscriptions about the Battle of Kadesh the same as the ones in the Abu Simbel?
More or less, yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
And how about the magazines? Were they used for cult practices?
I'm sorry, for what?
The magazines used for cult practices?
Occult? No, the magazines were used for storage of either grain or occultic equipment or precious material like gold and silver, but not for cultic practices.
Okay. Your plans look as if the temple proper is exactly rectangular, but you said something about the 10% deviation. Most of the other major temples of Ramses II were slightly skewed. For example, parallelograms in shape, for example, the Ramesses and the first court of Luxor. Did you mean that there is a slight skew in the temple as well?
Yes, no, not the temple. What I meant that the center line of the temple was shifted from the center line of the precinct by, in our case, 10%. And this seems to be the plan in the other temples that I showed, whether in Medinat Habu, that you find the northern part of the precinct is slightly larger than the southern. Same thing with the Ramesseum and the Temple of City, the first, obviously. And the Temple of Merneptah, the same.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple more questions. Questions still coming in. Given the similarities of all the OK settlements found, does that allow us to draw any conclusions about official settlements at the time?
I would say the answer is yes. Egypt went through a period of about a century of decentralization, and the local areas have took things upon their hand, and they start to build their own structures rather than send the whatever they have to the main administration. And yes, there is similarity between all these different localities.
Okay, is there a way to use ground penetrating radar to outline where the temple might have gone out in the area where houses are now built, which can't be excavated?
The answer is yes and no. The the ground penetrating radar, is not very reliable, but we will try that as well.
Great, okay, good. Is there any evidence of a nearby mud brick royal palace?
No, we don't have any evidence of that,
Oh, not yet, okay.
or not yet, at least. Yeah.
What's the youngest material found in the magazine?
The youngest material found in the magazine?
Correct. What's the youngest material found in the magazine?
The youngest material, we will probably 8th or 9th century AD. One of them is the Astrakhan that I showed, of the showing the early version of the Arabic script. And this is, I would say, the youngest, most recent object that we found.
Okay, thank you. How far away was the Nile at the time the temple was built? And was there a harbor there?
There's definitely was a harbor to the east of the Temple of Ramses. As a matter of fact, all temples must have some kind of a waterway to transport the stones. There is an indication, evidence that there was a canal running to the east of the temple that connects the temple of City the First and Ramses II to the temple of Osiris, running from the south to the north.
The south to the
We have
north.
an evidence of that. But to answer the first part of your question, where was the Nile at the time of Ramses? The Nile of the time of Ramses was a little closer than now, because the Nile seems to shift eastward over the years.
Who was closer?
Yes.
Interesting. Have you found any evidence of who might have been involved in warfare? And would that be related to the decentralization that happened? Or were there other forces at play at the time?
We don't have exact, because we didn't find that much. All what we found were these arrows, and probably there was a confrontation between Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt during the period of the Abydos Wars. But I don't know to what extent the temple was involved, except those arrows that we found.
Oh, the Abydos Wars.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, we had almost 20 questions. I think we're at the end of them. I want to thank you, Dr. Sameh, for taking the time to do this. I know you're getting ready to travel, and our membership has been awaiting this. this lecture for many months. So it's very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina, and thank everybody for tuning in, whoever you are, wherever you are.
Yeah, we have people from all over the world.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. If you have
Thank
any
you.
other questions, send them to us and we'll send them on to Dr. Sameh.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have a nice
Thank you.
afternoon.
Thank you.